I have to be honest with you and say, even English writers don't use semicolons very often. So don't be too worried about not understanding exactly how you use a semicolon. Colons, however, are used because it's often a pause in the sentence when then you'll have a list of things after it. The study was conducted on 4 different fruit types: colon, oranges, comma, apples, comma, and lemons. Full stop. So colons are often used, sometimes a dash. A long dash is used instead of the colon. Again, have a look at the journal style. The Americans put commas in places that the British people don't put commas in a long list of items. Americans will put a comma before the and, the British will not do that. So, I'm sorry it's confusing, but English is complicated. And my best advice is the advice I'll give you in our last session at the end of the course when we talk about how you might help one another. So, think about that for later. This morning we had a look at the outline of a paper and we saw a diagram, and I said to you that the introduction was like a funnel. So let's have a talk about the introduction section of your paper. There's the funnel, and all scientific manuscripts that I know of follow that general layout, that general design, where you start with some very general statements and you finish with some very specific ones that relate to your research. Now, I like to think of this in a very simple way. A very general statement would be that we live on the planet. And we get a bit more specific. And within the planet, we are living in Thailand. And we get a bit more specific, and in Thailand, we live in Bangkok. And we get a bit more specific, and in Bangkok, we live on the KMUTT campus. So we start with a global statement, we become more refined, and quite specific in the end about our particular research. So think about that when you're writing your introduction. Think about living on the planet, located in Thailand, in Bangkok, at KMUTT. Because that's how you need to present the introduction to your research. So, firstly, statements about the field of research to provide the reading with a setting or a context about the problem that you're going to investigate and its importance. So a very general, high-level comment about the field that you're working in, and we'll see some good examples of that shortly. Secondly, statements about research that other people have conducted into that particular problem, laying the foundation of information that's already known. So this is your literature survey. What have other people already done in that area of work? What is it that you're going to do, laying the foundation? What is it that you have identified as a gap in the knowledge that will form the basis of your study? How do you summarize everybody else's work to get to that gap? Which is the third part, the statement that you're making. Say, therefore, we believe that further studies in this area, whatever it might be, will advance our understanding of the problem and lead to whatever it is you're leading to. Better storage methods, better application of fertilizers, better use of irrigation water, whatever it might be. So you're identifying a gap in knowledge, explaining that gap, and how your study will provide results that will help to fill that gap. A then you state your objectives for your own research. Quite specific, quite focused. Why did we do the study? It may be that you're defining a hypothesis in quite formal ways. It might be that you simply state a broad aim. Alright, so we start with a very big statement about the world. Then we do the literature review, which helps us understand what everybody else has done before us. We tell the reader what the gap is, and then we tell the reader what our aim is in this particular paper in relation to the experiments that we've done. So you've got a structure to the introduction, 4 steps. 4 steps, remember that, and we'll keep coming back to it, because you can write your introduction in 4 sections, and that makes it easier for you to, as we say, eat the elephant. You don't have to eat the elephant, you can take 4 bites. Otherwise it's very difficult. So you begin your introduction with a very broad statement about the subject. Very broad. It should be a statement that builds on accepted fact. Something that's widely understood. Nobody's going to argue with you over it. Remember what I said this morning, you can't make somebody read your paper. If your first sentence in your introduction is confused, nobody's going to read any further. So the first sentence builds on an accepted fact, a known fact that everybody will accept. And the statement is often in the present tense. It's commenting about present knowledge. Let's have a look at some examples. As of 2010, there were 22,800 hectares of commercially grown pears in the United States of America, brackets USDA 2011, close bracket. Nobody's going to argue with that. USDA is a very credible organisation. This is a very exact number and a very defined year. Nobody's going to argue with you. So if you go on the rest of the paper and talk about pears, that's a nice, big, high-level introduction. Mississippi is the largest catfish producer and one of the largest freshwater farm-raised shrimp producers in the United States. Reference, bang, no arguments. Worldwide, some soils are high in copper, leading to the natural occurrence of copper toxicity. Statement of fact. The genus Viburnum includes more than 160 species of shrubs and small trees. Reference. So quite different areas of research, statements of facts. These are real, these are taken from real papers. Can't argue with it. Nice global statement. So in this case, the paper is going to be about pears, freshwater fish farming, copper toxicity in soils, and the genus Viburnum, probably an ornamentals paper. Alright, so stage 1 might only be 1 sentence. Might only be 1 sentence, that very high level statement. Might be a paragraph. We'll have a look at some examples soon. Previous studies. This is not easy. Literature reviews, when you read a good literature review, you think, wow, that's nice. But then you try and write one, and it's quite difficult. But the second part of your introduction, what is known, picks up on the references that you've got from your visits to the library, your searching on the net, and so on. You write statements that build on that broad introduction, that global statement, that lead to specific statements about your study, statements about what is currently known. Supported by references, and then statements about the shortcomings, the points of confusion, or the gaps in what is known. Again, you can use subheadings if you want to break down the different subtopics within the broad topic that you're studying. That's fine. Typically you wouldn't do that, you just use different paragraphs, but we'll look at some real examples shortly. There are a number of key issues about literature reviews and citing references that you need to be careful about and manage well. You need to have a good flow of information, be logical and well organised. So if the person in that first example was doing a study on pear production, they might have studied tree pruning, they might have studied fertiliser levels, and they might have studied fruit thinning. So you don't want to read one sentence that's about pruning, the next sentence that's about thinning, the next sentence that's back to pruning, and then another sentence on flowering. You want all the pruning stuff together, all of the thinning stuff together, all of the fertiliser information together. So you need to be logical and well organised. And that's where subheadings or paragraphs can help you. Even if you put subheadings in and take them out after you've written it, at least it's organised your thinking. But don't, in that introduction, don't jump from one topic to another. Try and develop the topic or the subtopic before you move on to the next one. When you are citing references, you must use the right style for the journal. No excuses. If they number references, then you must use numbers. If they use the ampersand symbol instead of an and, you must use the ampersand. And so on and so on and so on, depending on the journal that you're publishing in, or hope to publish in. So you must keep to the required style and make sure that everything that you cite is in the reference list and everything that's in the reference list is cited. And believe me, the referees and the editors will check that. One of the things I do as a reviewer is put ticks every time I see a citation in the text. I go to the reference list and put a tick to make sure that the author has indeed included it. And if I finish up with a reference list with some entries that aren't ticked, I think, oh, they put that in the reference list, but they've never used that in the text. So you make them rewrite it. Another month goes by.
Does that result in a rejection?
No, that doesn't justify rejection, but it will annoy people. Plagiarism. Don't copy statements unchanged from other people's texts. Turnitin and other software packages will find sentences and paragraphs that you've taken straight from the literature. And we'll talk a lot more about plagiarism later, but don't copy directly. You must put information, sentences, paragraphs out of somebody else's paper. You must put those in your own words. Otherwise, you'll be in deep trouble. You will be rejected. So be very careful about copying other people's work. Don't do it. It's not worth it. Put in the extra effort and struggle as you might, but rewrite that information in your own words. It's a good idea to try and draft an outline of the introduction, even if it's just groups of words where you take from that general position to the specific one. And then you start trying to write the detailed text under each of those full headings that you've written. At least it will give you a structure and a flow of information through the introduction. Construct a line of logic, we call that an argument, which justifies your own study and shows why and how it's important. Think about how you would tell me about your work, why you think there's a gap in knowledge, that I would then say, yes, I can now understand why you've done what you've done. Then your challenge is to get that in writing, because that is the basis of the overall framework for your introduction. We talked about linked words when we looked at the materials and methods. Here we talk about topic sentences. We'll have a look at some examples of those shortly. Move from general information to specific information. Make it easy to follow the logic of your presentation. Don't try and cite all of the previous work in the introduction. It's quite okay to keep some of your literature survey to use in the discussion. That's an important message to understand. Don't try and put everything that you've got in the introduction. It's quite okay to hold some back and use that in the discussion section.